What is up, Homebrewed Christianity listeners? It's time to nerd out with your geek out, because that's what happens on this podcast. And today on the podcast, you're going to get a live audiological experience of the Homebrewed Christianity podcast, like blowing up a Raleigh, North Carolina, our town, Rah-Rahville. I don't know if anyone's ever called it that before, but I was born there. And in this podcast, you're going to hear like 2 hours. This is excerpts from the live podcast. It was sold out, packed full of people enjoying some tastiness. The beer of the night. The beer that, if you came and you got your Homebrewed Christianity mug or drinking, was from Foothills, the Jade IPA. It is delicious. So it was excellent. And I'm joined by two of my former professors, Glenn Jonas and Adam English. They've both been on the podcast many moons ago, but they're back on. And Adam interviews me about my book, kind of, but just mostly wants to argue with me. And then I play a game with Glenn Jonas about 10 things I learned from him, 2 of which he remembers. One of the things I said he claims, even if he doesn't remember it. But it was fun. It was a blast. And they're both from Campbell University, Buies Creek, North Carolina. That's where I met my wife. We both did our undergrad there. I was a religion and philosophy major. And they're still there. It's an excellent place. If you want to go to the middle of nowhere in North Carolina, it's really the only option to go to the middle of nowhere, North Carolina, and nerd out. And if you go, make sure you tell them hi. I don't know how you would end up in Buies Creek, actually. You kind of have to go there on purpose. But if you were going there, then you should tell Glenn and Adam hi. And while you're there, you should go to the Oasis and get cheese fries, because they're delicious. They have a football team now. They didn't have a football team when I was there. The married housing that Alicia and I lived in our senior year was destroyed, and there's a football field. I find out in this interview that they added a street light while we were there. And by a street light, I mean the first one in the town. And we had a party for it. And that street light's now gone. They moved into traffic circles. And I was like, you have to have traffic for traffic circles. And apparently, Buies Creek's standing population when school's out is more than 30 at this point. I mean, it's still small. Anyway, that's a lot about Buies Creek. But this episode of the podcast is sponsored by the movie Last Days in the Desert. That's right. Ewan McGregor plays Jesus, and heads up, Jesus is in the desert during the temptations. In the last days of it, which are not in the New Testament, it doesn't tell what happens. You find out in this movie. Now let's say you don't think this is literally what happened. You find out in this movie a narrative engagement, a retelling, you could say, a theological narration of Jesus' identity via film with Ewan McGregor doing it. Let's say you're like, I don't know. What would it be like if Jesus was hanging out with a kid and farted in the desert? That happens in this movie. What would it be like if Ewan McGregor played Jesus and Satan at the same time and they gambled? That happens in the movie. What happens if, I don't know, Jesus wins the bet by not doing anything supernatural? That happens. He also dies on the cross at the end. But you probably knew that was going to happen already. So go to lastdaysinthedesert.com. You can find out where it's showing. You can request it to be shown. I know people that are showing this at their churches because they requested it and heard about it at the podcast. And on the 12th of May, which is like really soon, is like the kickoff. On the 13th, it's out in different theaters. So go to the website, lastdaysinthedesert.com. Find out about it, because they're sponsoring this podcast. You're going to sit here and say, I've never had so much fun at being in Raleigh at a bar while you and Glenn and Adam are talking. This is so much fun. Do you know it's shorter than this podcast? Last Days in the Desert, the movie. That's how long this podcast is. I'm just giving you a heads up. Enjoy it in bite-sized bites. Maybe turn it up to 3x. I actually have heard that that's not possible to go 3x with our podcast because I talk fast already. So sorry. Maybe 2x it. Yep, that's all I got for this. But thanks for listening to the podcast. This is a long one, so we're jumping in. Last Days in the Desert. Do it. And if you pay attention to the podcast, you'll get to hear Ewan McGregor and Rodrigo Garcia talk to us about it right here. All right, smoochy boochies.
Ours is a time of social and spiritual upheaval and a desperate need of a path toward healing and reconciliation. The Drew Theological School can set you on this path. The Drew Theological School trains leaders, scholars, activists, and pastors to be rooted in Christian tradition, innovative in spiritual reflection, and courageous in pursuing justice. Through studies in one of the 6 degree programs offered at the Drew Theological School, you will become the rooted, innovative, and courageous agent of healing and reconciliation our world so desperately needs. To apply for one of these 6 degree programs at the Drew Theological School, visit their website at www.drew.edu/theological or contact their admissions office at 973-408-3111.
Hi, Dr. English.
It's good to be here, my friend.
It's excellent to be here. And who would have known that one of the ways to get your professors to read your books is to let them talk to you about it in front of people?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I would have done this anyways. And I see there's a lot of folks out here who went to Campbell with you. And some of you I recognize and some of you I do not, because you have gotten old. It's not me that's changed. You've gotten old, so.
Well, if you're from Campbell, like, you know that every day's hump day. Yeah. So if you're a Camel, then you like to give a hump or holler. That's what we called it. Terry Michael didn't let us say hump or holler during BSU, but I thought we could always start it with, like, give us a hump or holler, and you go hump, hump, like that.
That is dreadful.
Well, it happened one time.
Yeah, I no doubt it only happened one time.
You can anticipate what I was like, we sell the bumper sticker in our store. Clearly, it's not inappropriate because Adrian Norman Wiggins would not approve of said bumper sticker if it always being hump day at Campbell.
I mean,
is anything but a reference to the camel hump.
Yeah.
Do you know what camel has 3 humps? A pregnant one. And that didn't happen except in married housing at Campbell University.
Now,
I definitely thought of that and emailed myself.
Now, I have heard the story of, according to our own president, of how Campbell named the camel as its mascot.
Gaylord the Camel.
Gaylord the Camel.
They were edgy before they even knew they were.
Because, and here's the reason, because the camel is the only animal that can go 4 years without a drink.
Well, is that a 1-hump camel or a 3-humper?
That has not been determined.
All right. Well, I just want you to know you're doing an excellent job recruiting for your school right now. They're like, I don't even know what they're talking about,
have no idea what
I
they're
want to
talking
find out.
Absolutely.
And now you switched the title of the program.
We're Christian Studies now, right? Yeah, we were religion and philosophy when you came along, but you wrecked religion and philosophy, so we had to change it. So it's all Trip Fuller's fault.
It's my fault. Well, I have thoughts about that, but
we figured we were
going to have to be aggressive because I rarely let other people ask questions.
Okay,
to me.
yeah.
So
let's get going here.
Assess me.
Absolutely.
But not so bad they don't buy it.
Absolutely no. The book is awesome. I mean,
yeah.
In fact, what you should do before you buy the book, if you haven't already bought it, is click around for reviews. Because what you'll find is that the reviews are awesome. I mean, 5-star reviews out there. And I mean, what it really shows is that Trip has got just some awesome fans out there. There's a lot of people that are following you. A lot of those reviews said, I'm a home brewer. We're following the podcast and we love what's going on in the book. So there's a lot of support, which, I mean, seems to me to say that you are meeting a need. You've got a distinctive theological voice that is clearly resonating with a lot of people out there. If I can use a homebrewed terminology, you've tapped into a real curiosity. Yeah, I mean,
you're not in Buies Creek. It's okay.
Absolutely. I mean, you've tapped into something here, which is, awesome. I mean, I'm so proud of you. We're so happy for you. But I mean, to get to my first question, I mean, some of the reviewers and responders really, you could tell they were trying to classify you or couch you or otherwise give you some kind of terminology to brand you. Like, is this postmodern? Is it millennial? Is it emergent? Is it dialogical? Is it progressive? Is it liberal? Is it post-evangelical? So, I mean, everybody hates labels. But my question is, do you or can you identify with a generic label that helps people place you in a conversation or in a stream of thought?
Oh, that's interesting. I mean, I can if you have to. So, label-wise, that's an interesting question because I used to just find the idea of being labeled as inherently problematic, and now I think they're actually helpful. But one of the things I've noticed is from reviewers, the label I get tends to be whatever they really want me to be. Yeah. And I feel like that's a compliment. I was told by like a couple famous evangelicals, I had no idea you were really an evangelical. I was told I didn't know you were a post-structural theorist. I was told this is the most reader-friendly introduction to queer theological engagement. I was told I didn't know that you could do theology and talk about the Bible so much. And so I feel like labels are better received in a conversation where you know what they mean, or just take them all. That's my new theory, is that I will come up with a reason that I will take almost any label.
So instead of rejecting all labels, you are in favor of just absorbing all labels.
I would say that I'm more open and affirming of labels.
Okay, so let's say there's a bathroom, and you have to label it.
And you have to label it? You know what's funny? Is has anyone ever read like restroom etiquette by God given in Leviticus? If you're at Campbell, you did. Well, no, y'all. If you're younger than me, I don't know. But I had it with Ballard, and Ballard had a whole lecture. This is the funniest lecture I'd heard in an Old Testament class called "How God Wants You to Go Poo Poo." And there's like straight up guidelines. Like, if you're going to drop a deuce, you have to go so far from where we drink, so far from where we eat. And a deuce is a number that correlates with an activity.
Yeah.
But since you're eating, you're welcome. And I was like, you know, if you're going to show up and call a special session to force through something on behalf of a giant ideological projection of a racist, homophobic Jesus, then you should at least do the Bible code stuff in there. And that would help. Like, what if you like push it through and you're like, in order for citizens of Raleigh, North Carolina to take a dump, they have to go 14 miles east of Cary. Yeah. That's because if you're from North Carolina and you live in Raleigh, everyone hates Cary unless you live there. Yeah. Then they love it. But I'm a both-and type of person. So if you were considering getting the book in from Cary, I love it. Exactly. And if you're not, screw them. Well, Jesus still loves them. It's okay.
You know, Stanley.
I'm not sure. What label would you want to give me? That's what I want to know.
Just to follow up on that, you know, Stanley Hauerwas and Will Willimon have a great expression that's, you know, any God who's not concerned with what you do with your pots and pans and genitals is not worth serving. So, I mean, there is a point to the Leviticus lecture here, right? That no. I got to certainly concerned with where you take a dump.
No, I'm not onto like a new law religiously, but if you piss on my toilet when you come to my house or leave pubic hairs, you have to wipe it up.
That's in Leviticus. Offensive. That's absolutely in Leviticus. Yeah.
And if you can't hit the toilet and you're an adult, sit down. It's like not a problem. You can wipe it up. You can sit down. It's amazing. Human beings, adult males. I mean, this is not a women problem. Men are just like, oops. Like, at what point would you go to someone's house and leave feces or urine? Like, you take a dump and there's a trail wind on the side?
This is why Deuteronomy 5 says to bind the law to your forehead.
Praise the Lord.
That when you're in the bathroom, you look in the mirror, that's right, I'm supposed to, put the lid down.
Yeah, it's right
That's
there.
That's what it says on your forehead.
Charmin 3:16.
Absolutely.
I say that, but then I think of like Michael Goodman and I's bathroom practices at Campbell. we had a room where it was like a suite, but only one side, so we had it to ourselves. But we had a wheelchair accessible shower, to which we left a chair in the shower so you could just turn it on and sit there.
But the point is that you were taking showers in college. That's a good thing. I mean, I think we should applaud you for that.
Occasionally you could turn in your student ID and have girls to your room. And that was right about the time that two amazing inventions happened for college males. The Swiffer and Febreze. For Febreze, then you didn't have to, like, you could really stall doing laundry until I went home and my grandma would volunteer to do it. And, you know, when someone wants the opportunity to serve.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, you give it to them. Like, that's an extra crown in heaven for Nana.
Yeah.
My laundry. Yeah. And so you have, like, the it's been too long pile. Then you have the and you just kind of Febreze it and then flip it over and Febreze every day. And then you kind of pull what's up off top as long as but if it's been Febreze too much, it gets a little crackly and you know to put it in the wash pile. And then you know when to go see your grandparents.
I mean, that's also in Deuteronomy. Moses is actually the inventor of the one who parts the seas can also Febreze. So, yeah, I mean, absolutely.
Never mind.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know where we're going with that.
Well, I did. I just self-edit sometimes because I'm maturing.
Oh wow! Well, you'll lose that ability to self-edit as you mature. Actually, that's a sign of age there.
It is, but I still haven't found out what label you were going to give me.
I mean, I don't have a label for you.
And in the first question, I didn't even say anything about the book.
Yeah, I know. Well, okay, let me get to the book.
Okay.
All right, so we're going to the book.
I thought you were judging my book. Now I'm judging your questions.
I mean, I was just, I didn't know what the label.
I don't know what to do with this.
I mean, I want to give you a label. I just.
No, you have to give me more than one, though.
Yeah, I'm going to give you about
3, because you're a Trinitarian.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Are we going to argue whether or not the Trinity is necessary for Christianity, or is it just the incarnation?
I mean, no, I'm ready to go.
Your dissertation advisor thinks so, and he told me about it on the internet. That's why I was asking.
Oh, Barry Harvey?
No, Roger.
Oh, Roger Olson. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, I'm sure.
It was a joke. It was a bait. Just ignore me and go on. That's why I was saying you have to drive.
Okay, here we go. So, I mean, one thing that drew me in was really the first page. I mean,
tapped you in.
If I can, let me just take a minute to contextualize my next question, if that's all right.
Yeah.
I accepted a call to ministry at the age of 16, and no one in my immediate family was in the ministry or in any kind of nonprofit work. So, I had no idea what was going to happen next. I didn't know if I was supposed to go to college or straight to seminary or what that would be like. And so my dad used to just really terrorize me about seminary. You know, he'd say, the first thing and the most important thing they're going to teach you is how to preach. You know, and the second thing they're going to teach you is how to preach for money. And to make money on this. And so
I know a lot of people that think divinity schools failed on that second option.
Well, yeah. I mean, he said, and by preach, what they're going to do is they're really going to teach you how to thump the Bible and stomp around on stage, wave, gesticulate, really.
Your dad told you, you're going to a seminary. They're going to teach you to gesticulate.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, yeah. No, absolutely.
I'm pretty sure there's a Levitical prohibition against that. If you searched gesticulation, GIF, whatever it is, you wouldn't be allowed to tweet it.
So what he would say is that, before you're allowed to graduate from seminary, they're going to take you out to a field of old rusty lawnmowers. And you have to start one of these, grabbing the ripcord and yanking and saying, Jesus, Holy Ghost, and a Bible, you got to start one of these things.
I feel like your vocation inspired him to work on a stand-up routine.
Oh yeah, I mean, it was terrible. I mean,
he's if he's going to be a minister, I'll have to be polite and listen to him preach every once in a while. So I'm going to ride his ass when he comes home. I got more Jesus jokes.
I mean, I was full of fear and trembling. I get to seminary. I actually started out on the landscaping crew because I'm looking for this field of dead lawnmowers. I mean, I want to know what's going to happen here at the end.
So you can work a weed whacker.
Oh, I can work a weed whacker.
Yeah.
I can work a weed whacker.
You just whack all over the place.
So, I mean, that's the context. That's the context for my dad. And so he would also kind of needle me, through seminary and, all along he'd needle me with these questions. One of his favorite being, if Jesus was not only God's son and fully divine, but also human in every way that you and I are human, and he never married and presumably never had sex, did he have night emissions? And I see that on page 2, you answered my question.
You're welcome.
So, yeah, I could have saved myself all that seminary.
You still have to buy the book.
So, I guess my question is, in all seriousness, why is this a relevant question for the humanity of Jesus?
I've taught confirmation to 200 and some teenagers, and it's one of the most relevant questions they ask.
There you go. So, okay, tell us, why is this a relevant question for the humanity of Jesus? I'm sorry, why is this a relevant question for the humanity of Jesus?
Exactly. Microphones.
Thank you.
But you're a minister. They taught you weed whacking, not mic work.
Yeah, that's all I learned. I'm still looking for that.
If you can whack and work at the same time,
I'm still looking for
people will come to hear you talk, and you do not have to worry about bringing in the money. But, what's interesting is that the church called multiple councils, Christological councils, arguing about, how is it that our experience of God continues to be mediated by Jesus, and we have these symbols and narratives that come from Judaism, which is kind of against God being incarnate, connected to this experience, which makes it, you have to just reread everything in light of what's happened. And then the temptation in the early church was to distance us from Jesus, to make Jesus the exception to being human rather than the exemplar. And as fully human, one part of it, especially the discipleship part, is that you're not off the hook for figuring out how to embody beauty, truth, goodness in the most rich and contextual way that you're called to. Jesus did it, and that's a possibility for you, especially those who have been baptized into Christ, who've taken up the mind of Christ. Like Paul talks, this is kind of what Christians do. So the defense in the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th century of the full humanity of Jesus was arguments where people wanted to put Jesus off and distance themselves from him. And so they're like, well, Jesus was human, but God replaced his soul with a divine soul, the Christ soul or the Logos soul, or God replaced the mind or the will. It was inserting the divinity by cutting out the humanity. And every time they called a council, it was against some divinizing heresy. So to me, I obviously have problems with Platonic metaphysics that are really built for drinking it in the evening discussions. But the heart of the Christological controversies was the church's insistence that we experience ourselves as known and loved completely by God through Jesus, and he was fully human. So what do we do with it? I think that's like the coolest part of the early church.
Yeah.
Right? Like, eventually, people want the distance from Jesus. But I don't think it's for good reasons, like thinking reasons. I think it's for the sheer human reasons of, we would always rather outsource responsibility.
Yeah.
So if you are an ordained clergy, there's a reason you get paid. 15% of the people that go to your church haven't outsourced it. They volunteer all the time or burn out and give you a hard time every time you don't do everything they want because they have a weird cherished self-image that's connected to their participation in the church. The rest of them are paying you so they don't have to. And then when I've said this a number of times, and be like, no. Well, one person in my church of 400, and you're like, exactly. The fact that a name is your response proves the point. So one of the goals of the book was to take the historical Jesus research to contemporary Christology research to retell the history of the development of the doctrine in a way that the individual is figuring out what does it mean for Jesus to be freaking awesome as a follower of Christ in a community, rather than let me find the right label so I can pass the question and avoid eternal conscious torment. And C.S. Lewis just screwed us up by saying that the question is like, do you want to be a liar, Lord, or lunatic? Because like all three options are rather rhetorically violent And Aristotle could verify this, but we're not going to talk about Aristotle's explanation of rhetoric. But if you're talking to someone who's like, Jesus is Lord, do you think he was a lunatic? Like, what do you want to do? Tell your friend, like, yes, you know the thing that's most important to you? We're friends, but he was batshit crazy. Like, that's somewhere in how to win friends and influence people, is to make fun of their mom and Jesus. And then it's like, liar. One, real New Testament scholars do not think Jesus actually said something that equates himself with God. This isn't Tripp. This is like N.T. Wright and Marcus Borg both think it, which is like the spectrum theologically. They all think the phrase, Jesus thought he was God, is problematic. That doesn't mean he's not. I'm just telling you that to say Jesus is Lord is not immediately obvious if you read the scriptures. Ironically, the disciples occasionally thought so, and then they think the definition of it is completely wrong. Like Peter says, who do people say I am? Blah, 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 blah. All those examples are people that know Jesus and don't think he's that special. Heads up, those human beings are your friends and they go to your church, so probably not give them shit for not agreeing with you all the time. It might make the church not so dumb. Anyway, then when he says you are the Christ, Son of the living God, he's like, yeah, and God had to tell you that. Now, if God has to tell you something for you to figure out the truth, that means it's a revelatory encounter and not evidence that demands a verdict. So go ahead and take those books off your shelf and burn them in the name of biblical conservative Christianity.
I could go down with that.
Third is that then 2 chapters later, the one Jesus had said God revealed his real title, Son of the living God, is like, oh, we shouldn't go to Jerusalem since they're going to kill you and die. That's a ridiculous idea. And then what's Jesus say? Get behind me, Satan. Because he had got the vocab lesson right, Lord, but the content of it was completely wrong. The church has let Caesar, who builds crosses, take our doctrine and redefine the terms and then hands it back to us. So that we, like Peter, will gladly say Lord, but not say this is freaking awesome because it actually has good news answers to the oppressive systems of our time. So I mean, that's the...
Well, I'm wondering here, so you're saying then, in a sense, that by our maybe overemphasis on the lordship to the neglect of the humanness, in a sense, that eases our consciences because we've got somebody so high and mighty beyond anything we could ever hope. But it also kind of relieves us from having to do anything ethically. I mean, I don't really have to be like Jesus if Jesus is so far removed and different from me that there's no way I could even approach that. So in a sense, I mean, well, no, of course I can't be like Jesus, so I don't even have to try. So maybe are you challenging that idea some?
Well, 2 things. One, I don't think Jesus thought you had to be like him. I think the gospel is that you get to.
All right.
Like, when evangelicalism, give me 3 nerdy minutes and then Dr. Jonas can assess whether this is true. It's Tripp's kind of new theory he's been running in his head. When Protestants come up with some notion of election, sovereignty, covenant, some way in which your identity as God's beloved in the covenant thing is completely a work of God, elect, whatever. Then free market capitalism and enlightenment notions of the self encounter in Protestantism in America. So that there's a morphing of the experiences which verify your elect identity early in American religion to essentially like turning the experience and process into a transactional endeavor in order to verify that you are a loyal McDonald's, Starbucks, or Jesus customer. And you learn the language, venti, and tall is a small. Like, what the hell's that? But if you learn all the language right, you too can know that you belong there when you show up because the language is weird. But if you know it, you belong. Yeah. And so, but what that did is it then made the gospel, the Protestant part of it, wasn't about God's free-loving initiative to embrace us. It was about cultivating experiences and giving programs so you can no longer be anxious that you've met God's demands. Right. Well, I prayed this prayer, I walked this road, I did all these things. And ironically, that was never Jesus' concern. He actually pissed people off because he confused moves toward wholeness and forgiveness of sins. Jesus is like, hey, your sins are forgiven. Pick up the mat and walk. I hate when I heal people with theologians in the room. They're so pissed God cares about the poor and impoverished and outcast that they're being reconciled in the community, can walk and have dinner with their family, that they want to do a theology test. So Jesus just mocks them. He's like, say whatever you want. Sins forgiven, healing, I don't care. This is what the kingdom of God's doing. It's bringing wholeness and reconciliation into being. And if you want to pass a theology test, I'm sorry.
So let me ask you this. I mean, go ahead.
I just want, like, the main point is like that we don't have, when we say, the lordship of Jesus and stuff, I don't think the definition is Christian.
Okay.
It is actually like free market religion. And then once you have the anxiety, I mean, I was a campus minister after being, leader in BSU, and the number of people that come out of evangelical churches who every time something bad goes on in their life, they think the biblical Christian response is, will I enjoy eternal conscious torment or not? Yeah. We have reinvented Luther's dilemma using his doctrines. Like, it used to be that, like, and there's a chapter on, like, about the Protestant understanding of grace. Like, faith is trusting what God says about you is true and what other people isn't. Your parents say you're not good enough. Your friends can say you're too ugly, or whatever it is. The most true thing about you is God saying you are my beloved. That's faith. Yeah. You don't even contribute to it. It's just you're deciding who you listen to. And then we've turned
but isn't
like that release into something you then market, peddle, and terrorize people. If a Protestant thinks that it is pious to feel like God wants and probably could put someone in hell for all eternity, then you've redone what Luther was getting over.
But I'm wondering, let me just push back a little bit here.
Yes,
I mean,
push back.
I like what you're saying in many ways, but isn't there a danger that, in a sense, your message, like God loves you and is okay with you and this kind of thing, I mean, that kind of just feed into the millennial need for a participation trophy?
Because the millennial need. I do want you to know who invented participation trophies. It was not millennials. We're burdened with them.
Well, yeah, so, okay. So the Gen X preachers are giving you participation trophies. Maybe
it's our
Gen X
boomer
folks,
parents.
Maybe the boomers are
the
saying,
worst
look, God loves
generation
you.
in the United States.
Oh yeah, that's probably true.
They have the worst president in both parties. They are the most likely to have started wars but not served if they are elected. And they were the ones that like peace, reconciliation, and weed and good music when they were young, and then pay the same people to play the same songs to relive those experiences while all their investments are in things that are destroying the poor and the planet.
See, notice how the millennial here is diverting the blame onto someone else here.
Well, giving participation trophies is stupid.
Okay.
You want to know something funny?
Is God's love
the
just
parents
a participation
in Elgin's
trophy?
leagues voted not to give them. They were like, we don't want them.
No, nobody wants them.
Well, grandparents. I don't know.
Right. You get the picture. It's just one
I feel
trophy.
like if we get one and we all took pictures with it at the end of the season, we could just save the picture on Facebook and not actually have to have
Absolutely.
them.
I'm all for that.
But if Google destroying kitty trophies on YouTube, and you'll find a reason to pull those out of the attic.
So go back to a question here. I mean, is there a sense in which the love of God and this whole business could just kind of be reduced down to one enormous participation trophy? I mean, I'm not in favor of reinventing the angst of Luther, but I mean, there's a sense in which Luther, I mean, he kind of really works through something to get this. I mean, so if we say, no, don't work through anything. Look, God loves you. That's all you need to know. And he's totally happy with, whatever you're going to do with your life, which I'm sure is going to be fantastic. And, here's your cell phone policy and your ticket to heaven. And I mean, right? Is there a danger here?
Well, I think the second half of the stuff you said, I don't even know if I'd go with. So,
well, that's okay.
But no, you're provoking me.
There you go.
You're doing good. Don't step back. Press it harder. So when you pick the word participation, what I immediately thought is that participation was the category the early church used for salvation. And if you were to kind of you have the Protestants, Catholics, and the Eastern Orthodox and the renewalist the Renewalist and the Eastern Orthodox share a particular understanding of the active event, which is participation.
Yeah, but here's the difference. The early fathers did not think they were entitled to participation. They were amazingly grateful at the discovery that God had so condescended to meet them in worship.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm wondering, do people now feel like they're entitled to God's participation?
Man, if
God doesn't show
they were
up.
entitled, you should just watch football and not go. Like entitled.
Yeah, I mean, this is kind of like
I feel like millennials are like the first generation that when they hear religious people talk, automatically eye roll, and you have to overcome it. And
yeah, because they're entitled to have whatever
not
they
entitled,
want. Right?
they just think it's BS. So like you're like, oh, that's interesting. That's a neat story, but Star Wars is cooler.
Yeah, so make it cool for me because it's all about
it's
me.
Just not. I don't see it. I mean, I've been a minister to a lot of millennials, and I've not thought they thought it was about them.
Okay.
I think most millennials' experience of the church is that everyone else there doesn't give a shit about them, and they should learn to enjoy what their parents and grandparents are paying for. And if they can't find participation in it, then it's their problem, and they should pray about it. They don't like the participation trophy they do in the basement, and no one else cares. Like right. So the millennial, like in relation to religion. And the other part is, I only did it with like 600 people, and they're in Los Angeles, so. Your social science, preface statement, whatever. But we did these. I helped host them. I didn't do it. Actual social scientists did it. I just was recruiting. But so it was like 600 16 to 20-year-olds.
Yeah.
And they saw like clips of all these different type of expressions of religions and faith. And then they did like while it's happening, responding, and then post encounter responding and stuff like that. Across the religious traditions or non-religious traditions or multi-faith people, the things they were attracted to in each faith where what you're participating in isn't what fixes you, but what you get to participate in that transforms the world's real material needs, like poverty, planetary crisis, and things like that. And so I feel like I haven't even figured out exactly how to talk about it, but there's a difference if the gospel story is primarily that God is as good as Jesus said God was, because the good news is still good at a time where humans can destroy the planet and all these type of things, and you get to participate in a movement that wants to make a difference. And that's why Jesus, like whatever, that's good. But your personal thing is second. The personal narrative is secondary to getting to be a part of something that believes something, which is always attractive. Millennials are very uninterested in sermons that aren't actually about sacred text of the tradition and what the person actually thinks. It's rather humorous. Boomers love for you to say practical things about their life, which we can all find on the internet in like 5 minutes, and for you to tell us about yourself and your feelings and be authentic.
Yeah.
Millennials are like, Twitter is where that happens. I don't care what anyone really feels about themselves, and I'm not going to come here to hear you like process your therapy sessions in front of me.
Yeah.
So, and I didn't expect that because most that's not what I assumed the intuitions were. So the participation part is a part of a community or a movement that's engaged in bringing healing and wholeness in the world, and the narrative part is your identity is nestled in a story that's told that's about more than just you.
Yeah, that's good. Maybe we can I want to move on to your book. One of the real highlights.
It's always good 30 minutes in to talk about the book.
Well, to me, one of the highlight shining moments of the book has to do with your own rendering of the Greek phrase basileia theon. You talked about it a little bit in the introduction, but of course it's a phrase traditionally rendered the kingdom of God. Jesus again and again throughout the gospel returns to the kingdom of God. I mean, many scholars would say that kind of the two themes of his teaching was the kingdom of God and the fatherhood of God. So this is not some minor point. This is a major center of the teachings of Jesus. So I kind of want to work through this a little bit. I mean, first of all, can you tell us just a little bit, what are your concerns about the rendering of this phrase, basileia theon, in the 21st century progressive Christian context? I mean, what concerns you about even needing to look at this phrase?
Well, part of the reason to look to it comes from two places. One is contemporary Second Temple period Judaism research has pointed out that large numbers of the words we use about Jesus, if we think he's awesome, are political words. So when you say Jesus is Messiah, I don't know if anyone knows this, but everyone else who ever had the word attached to them, and it's in the Bible, it's not heresy, were political leaders. And the Greek is Christ. So like when you say Jesus Christ, you're like Jesus, the political leader of Israel. When you say Son of God and Prince of Peace and things like that, you're giving Jesus titles Caesar had. They are not about 4-year-olds with blankets on their head holding a stick on Christmas Eve.
Yeah.
When you say Jesus is Lord, you're ironically saying what you're supposed to say when you paid taxes to the Roman Empire. When you would say that Caesar is Lord and Jesus is Lord, those are contradictions. The ecclesia, the word translated church, which is the kingdom organized after the resurrection, was what the citizens of Rome and conquered territories did when they gathered to rule. The ecclesia of Rome were citizens of Rome in conquered territories making political decisions. Paul, who thinks that Jesus should have all the titles Caesar does, is arrested and goes and gets killed by that very same empire in Rome, is starting alternative ecclesias of God.
Yeah.
Started by who? Jesus the Christ, whom they crucified. What is the crucifixion? It is a political act. When it says like next to thieves, it's really next to political rebels. And so like when the historical stuff makes the kingdom of God like the reason Jesus was taken out, not, people go to heaven.
Yeah, I'll give you one more piece of the historical context there. The ecclesia is also originated in Athens. You know, it was 4 times a year. All the citizens would gather on the Pnyx, the hill there in Athens. We're talking about 40,000 citizens for direct democracy, and that gathering 4 times a year to vote was called the ecclesia.
So the early church, a biblical church, is a free church.
Absolutely.
That was our Baptist moment of the evening.
Absolutely. Sponsored by Campbell University. Baptist,
where every day is Hump Day. And you can stay dry for 4 years.
So, I mean, tell us a few of can you just kind of go with this?
The other side of it was the theological one.
Yeah, okay, go ahead.
That language functions, so it's not benign, and we all think it is. We also tend to think, if you don't pause long enough, that a word actually has a meaning and is determined elsewhere. And if you wonder why the rules are so strong, it's because you don't know this, but you secretly think there's a correspondence between noises you make and some truth outside of you. And that's why if you say shit, it's immoral. You can play a game. Don't say it's a good idea. Your wife may get mad at you, but you could convince your kid during preschool years that shit's the appropriate word, but no one says poop. That's wrong. And then when he says it at preschool, you get in trouble.
We just prefer Scheisten.
Oh, you make it sound German and it just goes so much better. But once we learn that language functioned, then if it functioned as subversive in its historical context, namely that when Jesus talks about the kingdom of God, he's like giving a finger to the Roman Empire and the temple system that uses religion to oppress people and keep them enslaved rather than liberate them, where their religious leaders played golf with the Pharaoh as opposed to telling him to let people go. Like, that's what the kingdom of God was doing. But if you don't have that context, how does it function? You could have people think that being a really good Christian actually makes you the most amazing citizen of the empire ever. Yeah. Now, obviously, in a Christian country like ours, we don't have that problem. No. But I have heard others where their nationalism is indistinguishable from their Christianity.
So I've heard.
So once you learn how language functions, then the question is, does the God movement that Jesus brought into being made present and God put a permanent place of it being the horizon of all things through the resurrection best encapsulated by language that no longer is provoking and contrasting in our day? So theologians discuss it. Kingdom sounds hierarchical. And it was, Jesus was being ironic by having like the least hierarchical kingdom.
Yeah.
But no one gets that. So they're like, King Jesus, Almighty. Almighty is actually not in the Bible. I talk about that in the book. I did slip into lots of prayers. It's a translation of the Vulgate. El Shaddai in Greek, in Hebrew is translated in the Vulgate by Jerome. which is the first Catholic Latin translation, the official one. And then when it gets moved out of that, it's just Almighty, Almighty. El Shaddai, it can mean two things in Hebrew. One, mountains you escape to in war, and mama's boobs that never run dry. And there are two, like, divine names throughout Hebrew scriptures. And I know this because Kathy told me. So to say that El Shaddai is one of God's names that God gives God's self. And Hagar gives God one. So you should probably not hate your Muslim friends. But only person to give God a name to God's face. It's in the Bible. It's not edgy. So I came up with the idea that we should, I was talking with a rabbi. I don't remember if this story made the book or not. But I was talking with a rabbi and who was telling me that El Shaddai means like either well-breasted one, which in a time where babies died, a mom that doesn't run dry is like the best, like, metaphor for a God who knows you and loves you completely and is with you in every instance. And Isaiah says, when Israel goes, did you remember me in exile? Isaiah goes, can a mom forget one that they breastfed? I can never forget you, Israel. And so, I mean, this isn't like weird feminist bullshit that Tripp's saying. This is like just the Bible. So El Shaddai, like, you have boobs, mountains you escape to. And so I thought, and I've told this to my confirmands, that when you're in prayers, because I never say Almighty in church, I find that to be like the least Christian word to use, is just to say Tetons. It changes prayers, changes hymns.
Wow,
do
that's
it next
amazing.
Sunday.
There you go.
See, it's as funny as playing the Under the Sheets game with hymnal titles, except that it's theologically edifying. And no confirmand forgets that story.
That's awesome.
And omnipotence is the metaphysical comment the church gave that God's been wanting to give back for years. So, but the language. So, the historical reasons, and we know that language oppresses people. It keeps women down. It can keep people of color down. It can give people a privilege, a primary voice, all that kind of stuff. So, progressives come up with all sorts of different ways to translate it.
That's my next question here. I mean, it's Basileia Theon in the Greek. In Latin, it's Regnum Caeli, and then in the English, it gets translated into the reign of God or the kingdom of God. But so a lot of theologians and translators are noticing just what you're saying and trying to come up with some other way of rendering this phrase. Just give us a sample of some of those alternative renderings of the kingdom of God that you have seen out there.
Well, if it's written kingdom of God, but just with a like Heidegger slash through kingdom, that's always fun.
Oh, wow.
You get extra postmodern points if you can't appropriately read the text you're reading. Awesome. Reign of God is one, because the kingdom of God, Jesus wasn't the Messiah apart from a community. Like, for Jesus to be the Christ, it actually happened in the friendship of the women and men he traveled and served with. The temptation scenes of Satan in the desert are temptations to give a definition to the Christ or Lord that involve a singular person doing the fulfillment. Jump off the temple, slide down Silver Surfer style, and they'll all know you should be in charge. Or, hey, if you like cross your fingers, bend down, and half bow to Satan, he'll make you Caesar, and you'll obviously be more benevolent. You'll feel the burn and junk. And but those are, the vocation is for you to do something. And what does he do? He's filled with the Spirit, says no, goes out and immediately calls disciples and brings people in. The kingdom of God is what God's up to, and that's what Jesus is focused on. He was not really walking around with a mirror focused on himself saying, check me out. It's a community. So a lot of those things like the reign of God or the commonwealth of God, but don't do it because that's too Virginia. These type of things are reformulating it so that the contrast between how it was used and how Jesus used it, subversive style, is in the word itself. So when I drop the G.
Yeah, so let me, I think the audience wants to hear you read from your book tonight. Am I right? Am I right? So, I've got this paragraph. I mean, this is a fine paragraph, my friend.
Wow.
Would you read us this paragraph? There, the bottom one.
You want me to read the sentence you added?
It's just, Adam English is amazing. Almighty is fine. Whatever you want to put there.
As a minister who's been blessed by an education at Campbell University, in which every day is Hump Day, I have challenged my congregation by dropping the G out of kingdom. I can preach an entire sermon, and only a few people with ears to hear will notice the absence of that one letter. When they ask why I preach kingdom instead of kingdom, I point out that when you remove the G, you take out both the phallus, don't think, and the crown out of the kingdom. After all, that's how Jesus rolled.
That's a great paragraph. Am I right?
I know. I have like four really good paragraphs in there.
That was awesome. That one was special. I love dropping the G because it does both moves at once, and it also retains some of the traditional language, and loses it at the same time.
Well, and like doing it that way wasn't to be subtle and provoke conversations at first, but then I found out it worked that way. And as a minister, you know that when you have theological conversations, you would rather it be because they're actually interested and are questioning and not trying to come up with something to put in an email chain to your congregants. So if they pick it up and then start, you're having a conversation they obviously wanted to have and put effort into it. Yeah. So it had that perk. But the real reason was that, and I talk about in the book, that the three kind of historic images that come out of the Hebrew scriptures for God are king, judge, and father. And I have found that a lot of Christians are better disciples of John the Baptist than Jesus, and they don't reorganize priority. When Jesus calls God Abba, when Abba is king, then you're royalty, not like a lowly serf. This isn't odd. Like Jesus is like, no, you're not. I told you everything I know, and you're going to learn out more, and that's why I call you friends and not servants. It's in the Bible. It's in John. Like when Abba's king, you're royalty. You're not begging for a place at the table. You're the reason we throw parties. And if you don't think that, then it's because you're like drowning, like it's pouring down a giant monsoon, and you haven't figured out your neck works. Right? Like when the older brother and the prodigal son. He comes back and there's a party and he's like, you haven't even given me a coat. And the father's like, you've been with me all the time. All I have is yours.
What about?
Did you know you have a neck? Don't dry. Throw it up, drink it, and you're going to have a party. I'm sorry you've been torturing yourself. So like that king reshaping his father changes it. When the judge is Abba, it's an adoption court and not your eternal conscious torment murder trial. You're showing up and God's like, guess what? You're going home. That's how Abba rolls. Drop the G. So the part of the dropping the G was to say, part of us identifying the word of God not with a text but with a person means hermeneutically, which is how we interpret. When we read the scriptures, we should read them through God's self-testimony in the person of Jesus. So if you're reading the Bible and God's not at least as nice as Jesus in it, Jesus advises you to fix it.
Yeah.
This isn't heresy. This is called we're not Jewish or Muslim. So that a living person with lice and popped boners in middle school is the image of the invisible God. There are councils preserving that humanity. And so to me that the ironic thing about the book, I got interviewed on the biggest Messianic Jew podcast. Wow. I have no idea how many people listen to it. I have no idea. I have no idea why they liked it, but she loved it.
Huh.
And was just like, yeah, that's what I'm saying. And I find out that she's a local Bernie Sanders organizer for the campaign and a Messianic Jew. And she's just like, I know, like if you're just a conservative Christian and know Jesus is Jewish and you just pay attention to it like any second temple period Jew would, then Jesus is like, if you can't be a biblical Christian and not be politically progressive, it's just there. No, you're like one of the most conservative theologians I've ever had on my podcast. And back to your label thing, I was like, I don't know if this is good.
What can I do to fix this?
I know, but it's a very niche market. I don't think if Al Mohler talked to me, he would do the same thing. So it's all good.
No.
Yeah, but his God is like 1/4 as nice as Jesus, and it's only to his favorite people. So
I'm thinking about your story there about the prodigal son. Couldn't we render this phrase as maybe like the party of God? The festival of God?
Yeah, so one of the exercises I would do with my confirmands, and you have to be 16 to do it, is you have to throw a kingdom banquet.
Oh, wow.
Which is a giant party. And this is my favorite one we did. We had a dance-a-thon.
Oh, wow.
So we brought in like a band and DJ. I'm friends with Trey of the band Everyday Sunday. And he also he was on tour, so he was going to DJ and do a dance party thing. And every confirmand had someone over 60 they're not related to as their confirmand partner. And in the confirmation process, the second half, you learn that person's faith story so that you can tell it to the whole group. So those two, as partners, had people sponsor them funking out at church. And so we had a funk off. And people sponsored the minutes of you and your over 60 not relative person dancing. And the fundraiser was connected to this nonprofit, a long thing. And the people that were from the nonprofit were the guests of the party. So we're throwing a party for the nonprofit they had gone and served at. And that was what they came up with the challenge was, let's do something where it's like almost impossible for Jesus not to think it's awesome. And they were like, so we have to have a party, we have to dance, it has to be multi-generational, has to be transformative for other people, and the people at the party can't be the people you normally invite. So we're going to invite those old people and the people we've been serving during the confirmation process. We're going to throw a party, and we're going to raise money to actually invest in that. And during it, we'll tell the story of the old people to the rest of the church they didn't know, and the story of the nonprofit. And I was like, yes. So that's why Jesus is just like funk out.
Yeah, my mind
not
is
funk
blown.
off. It's different.
That gets back to weed whacking. Yeah, my mind is blown. It's blown. I mean, another really just great moment in the book, which I love this language. I never thought about this before. You talk about asking Jesus out of your heart.
Well, the story.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about that story.
Now, that was one they made me edit repeatedly.
Oh, I'm sure.
It was more coarse than I was going to get in the book, and I could anyway. So there's a surfer dude, and I write. If you're a minister, one of the coolest places to have sermons someone else might listen to that doesn't pay you. So always write them in other places in your community. When they ask you what you're doing, you're like, well, I'm writing my sermon for Sunday. You do what? So I always did it at the same coffee shop next to the church I worked at. And over time, I was the minister at the coffee shop. And I just was, first time I renewed my contract was like, I do 10 office hours a week on campus. The rest I'm somewhere else because I'm human. And so I got to know the community and things. And so one of the guys, the story is in the book. It's a longer story, but he's like, sharing about his religious experience and growing up and all this kind of thing. And then he decides he's going to go read the Bible. And he had surfed for 3 hours, smoked up while I'm writing my sermon with all of his other smoker friends. And then they're like, dude, Trip. So you working on your sermon, man? And I was like, yeah. What are you talking about? Well, actually, I'm actually working on a book about Jesus. Gnarly. And the story's in there. So by the end, he's like, you know what I'm going to do, dude? I was on the wave today. And sometime when you're on the board and you're on the wave, and then you on your board on your wave, connect to the ocean. And then you're in it, but you are it. And I was like, obviously.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, so I was sitting there, and Jesus was just like, you should just read one of my books. So it's which one should I read? And I was like, I don't know, the Gospel of Luke. All right. Set in the Bible? I was like, yeah. I don't know. So he reads it, he comes, he's talking to me about it, and then he tells this story where he has this weird, I work 10 hours a week and surf all the time, surfer spirituality experience with Jesus, where he's like, I'm trying to get Jesus out of my heart.
Oh,
but
wow.
And I was like, you're what? He's like, yeah. That's why I hate Christianity, because people are just all trying to get Jesus in your heart, and then you don't do a damn thing for anybody. So I feel like if he moves in, it's because he's ready to get out. So you just got to pull it open and stuff, love and take care of stuff, man. I was like, yeah. But then he has this so there's this relationship goes on. Then it gets to Christmas time. And I had to combine this into one story so it sounds like it happens at once in the book. Yeah. And so then he comes back at Christmas and he's like, so, high tide shifting. So I think I'm going to come to your early church service when you're preaching about the baby G, I was like, yeah. Because, I've been reading that thing. I've read it like 6 times. Have you ever read the Bible just like super high?
I feel like this person's way more religious than I am.
He goes, when I was in youth group, man, they would like read it while they're staring over your shoulder ready to get you for something. But if you're like reading it and you're just like, yeah, then it just comes out differently. He's like, no, come to me if you're heavy burden. I'm like, yeah, dude. And he's like, we're having a party. So there's like, where's the water? I'm turning it to wine. And you're like, I like your mom. He's like got all these theories about all these stories about Jesus. So then he's like, so I came up with my prayer for Christmas, man. I want my heart. Now he's not giggling and I did not laugh at him even though I wanted to. I want my heart to grow bigger like a manger so Jesus can sit in it on Christmas.
Oh, wow. That's does he know what mangers are normally used for?
Gnarly. I know.
That is gnarly.
He has a very selective list of expertise. If you come to Redondo, we can go to Coffee Cartel, and there's a 70% chance he'll be there once high tide's over in about 30 minutes. And he gets a drink called the Morning Hammer.
The Morning Hammer.
Now remember, he just read the Bible and is high. And then gets a drink called the Morning Hammer, which is 4 shots of espresso.
Oh, wow.
Heavy cream. And boba balls. They're like little mini thingies of sugar. It's like, Can I have 4 shots of espresso, heavy cream, and just doblets of sugar in here with chocolate syrup on top?
Oh, wow. That'll give you a religious experience. Yeah.
Yeah.
I do believe.
Like upper and downer at the same time.
Oh, yeah.
And you're just ready for your heart to become a manger.
Yeah.
Like Luther said, in manger, cross, and empty tomb.
Yeah.
You see God's loving face.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Or if you're on a surfboard and you're like on a wave, but you are the wave.
That's like Yeah, it's like some serious panentheism.
Luckily, that doesn't happen at Campbell University. So.
No. Well, we don't have waves, for one, so.
Ask another question, then we'll do the thing with Jonas.
Well,
I need another drink significantly.
Yeah, I hear there's a great espresso cream drink that you might...
The Morning Hammer.
The Morning Hammer, yeah, I hear about that.
It's gnarly.
So, I'm curious because, a lot of the podcast, the origin of this was you just asking questions and, just exploring the ideas of other people. But now that you're at the hatchery and you're about finished up with your PhD, and so there's this transition where you've moved from the questioner to the teacher, to the proclaimer in a sense. I'm just kind of wondering, have you felt a shift in the force within you? As you go from, being the person who's always coming out with the questions and never really having to take a position, to somebody having to stand and deliver in a classroom and say something definitive. How has that shifted in you personally? How has it affected your theology?
Well, I guess a couple things is, but going full time at a school and leaving full time ministry was, I have like 7 sermons at all times I should have preached.
Yeah.
If you go from preaching regularly to not, you have to come up with new ways you read the Bible. Like, if you teach 2 times a week and preach, then there are like 3 things you're researching and planning for the Bible. And then like when you all of a sudden aren't doing that, you just start reading. The other day I read 1 Samuel. Because it wasn't like, I just read it. And I got done and was like, man, there's a lot of crazy stories in that thing.
There's a lot of crazy stories in there.
But it wasn't like you were... Yeah, anyway, so like, that's been one of the most interesting parts.
Oh, wow.
And then the shifting to like teaching and stuff, my teaching style is real similar to the podcast in the sense I play whoever the author is we're reading. So if you came to class, I would argue on behalf of whoever we read. Because I think theology is something, it's more like an art than a destination. So when you're good at it and you know the tradition, and you know the critical questions asked, and you know the different options, then you're doing theology in a doxological way. To think critically but faithfully about God is a confessing activity for me. Wow. So making you learn Karl Barth, even though I'm pretty sure he's wrong about 85% of the things, is
9.
If you laughed, Emil Brunner just cried. So, and if you didn't get any of those jokes, you have less student loans than those that do. So, unless you go to Campbell University.
That's right. Where every day's a hump day.
Yeah, every day's a hump day. Anyway, so I think there's a difference between doing something well and like making replications of yourself. So, like the systematic class I'm teaching this semester, you're reading Amos Young's systematic theology, Rosemary Radford Ruther, Peter Hodgson, and James Evans. So you're like Catholic feminist, the biggest charismatic theologian. Like Peter Hodgson's like the biggest Hegel scholar, but when you think of liberal Protestants, he's kind of it. And then James Evans is African American theology in America. And you read all of them on the doctrine each day. And I teach the questions, not the answers. So the intro is, here's why Christians have always asked this question forever. And my theory, and I say it in the book, is that to be a Christian is to think that certain questions are worth arguing about. And, you know, heretics are people you disagree with, but they've already decided the question's interesting. So I teach the questions and get you to learn to read and think in the theologian's head, which is always my goal when I interview them. If you want to know what Tripp thinks about any of the interviews, skip to 45 minutes in. Then I'm asking about the stuff that irritates me. Yeah. And, or that I really like. I'm like, well, now we're going to talk about what Tripp's interested in. But the first 40 minutes, I always try to do where I'm trying to evoke from them the ideas that someone that is passionate about their faith and a nerd and probably not very social. There's like 20% of every conversation gets edited out because I can't follow it. So, so my goal is like for you to be able to think and reflect. And sometimes you discover stuff by reading things you can't stand. And sometimes it's by resonating with it. Or sometimes you're reading like, why in the world do I even like this? Yeah. Yeah. It's like, or even with podcasts, like, why do you listen to this one, but you would never tell anyone and you won't review it? Which I know that because I get emails every week from ministers that listen to the podcast and don't tell anyone and won't review it. And, I did a live, on the book tour, I did one where 3 megachurch ministers all came that listened to it in the same city and they recognized each other at it.
It was like seeing each other at the liquor store, huh?
It was worse.
Oh, no.
The liquor store doesn't think you should stop preaching against gay people at church. And after it... No, like, it's amazing. A liquor store, they don't check your birth certificate to see how much you're allowed to drink. If you look like a dude, you could drink like a dude or whatever. Like no verification principle there. It's always good that the state runs it. Well, it's better to have a state liquor store than state religion. See? Come on, Baptist. So, but we might have the religion of wall. It'll be huge, except for the hands. And so they see each other after it. I've talked to a couple before, and then they see each other, and it's real awkward. So I walk up, and they realize they all listen on the DL. They are on like the big mega church of the area boards and stuff together. And I didn't know the awkwardness that was in this moment. I knew they all represent churches over 5,000 in flyover country. That was all I knew. And I was just wanting them to buy 100 books. But I was like, has the Assemblies of God figured out you like gay people yet? And they like looking at each other. And all of a sudden, straight white married dudes are wondering if they can come out thinking God might actually love everyone. It's the weirdest thing. They're ministers. Like ministers of the gospel of Jesus Christ. Not like they're like, I'm still pondering that. So they have this conversation. I realized that I made it really awkward for one, so I kind of pressed the others till they mutually embarrass each other, so that they would all lose their job if they turned on each other.
Oh, absolutely.
Because that's called being pastoral. Give everyone mutual dirt, and then you're quiet. I don't remember. I was at this restaurant. They happened to serve large amounts of beer, and the upstairs was reserved for religious activity. I bought a book about Jesus. That's approved. So
absolutely.
I get this email. I got copied into their email exchange after it, and they are like processing stuff out loud because they're all like either very kind of spirit-filled evangelicals to charismatic ministers in the same town.
Did you have to translate from tongues into normal text?
I want you to know that process theology, if you don't have any idea about the metaphysics, Pentecostals love that junk. They don't use the words that Whitehead uses, and they're like, obviously.
Yeah,
and you're like, you're talking about prehension. And they're like, no, I just trust the Spirit.
Yeah, because it's basically speaking in tongues.
So that's why I have a lot of student loans. But so I get copied in, and one of them had a teenager in the church commit suicide.
Oh, wow.
They had come out to their parents, who then sent them a MP3 of that pastor's sermon from like 4 or 5 years ago. When he was in transition on the idea of being open and affirming and stuff. And he was like, my desire not to change led to this very angry sermon.
Wow.
He had forgot, but it was received out of context. Like later, he's like, I overstated, we should be open and not affirming. It's like what every moderate something says, which means nothing if you actually are a person that wonders whether or not you're allowed to be present, but it makes some people feel better. And so they're having this conversation, and they all agreed that on the same Sunday, they were going to go, I don't really have an interest in explaining it all right now, and we can talk about it or whatever. I just want you to know that whatever question you have around your identity or your sexuality or your gender, that question doesn't change that you're God's beloved. And they had workshopped their paragraph they were going to say. And they all mentioned this person suicide because they were all, it's the same small community.
Yeah.
And these are the 3 biggest churches. And to me, that experience and watching and talking to them after, we'll every month or so have a group video chat, is why I think people what you could eye roll at theology as being really weird. I mean, I enjoy it regardless of its function.
Yeah.
And the fact that dead German philosophy is my prayer language is, not necessary. But that theology changes people's lives, and it has consequences I don't think we can ignore. And so doing it well and knowing what decisions you're making when you take different stands or not matters. And sometimes you get shocked into it. So, because in one sense, if I was their friend and this was not their context, I'd be like, well, how are you thinking how it affects your family? And how would we do it at the church? You would be rational and objective or whatever. But if you had asked any of them, if you said this one paragraph, someone in your church who's been there forever isn't killing themselves because they're pretty sure you think and God thinks they're horrible, then you would do it. Everyone would. And so to me, that, the reason you hesitate is because the leaders of the church are such bad theologians. That you're scared, the congregation discovering that each person's made in the image of God and no finite being can undo the affirmation of their being that God gave them with the dignity of being created. That's not odd. That's just the first part of the creed, right? So sometimes you get around to things theologically. Sometimes your theology has consequences you're unaware of. It's like the friendly fire of having read the wrong books and been pressured into bad ideas and then feeling stuck there economically. So the number of people who send those emails and then reach out has been, that's the main reason I enjoy doing the podcast.
Yeah.
Last month, we did an episode I did the podcast at Graduate Theological Union, which is consortium of a whole bunch of different denominations, divinity schools. And then the next day, Daniel Kirk, who was a New Testament professor at Fuller's Theological Seminary until he liked gay people and they fired them for it. It's called Doing It for Jesus. And we did a podcast called The Clobbercast.
Oh, wow.
And so Rick Mixon, who is an American Baptist minister, the first ordained openly gay guy with a PhD in psychotherapy and sexuality, First Baptist Palo Alto, teaches pastoral care and counseling, and he's on the board for the Alliance Baptist. Like him and Daniel Kirk and I walked through the Clobbercast passages. And we had a small room at their church, and then, there were like 40 or 50 people that showed up to come, and there's been 90,000 people download it, and I've got phone call after phone call on the speak pipe where you leave messages and emails, and the weirdest, shocking things are on it. Like, not like you're a heretic or whatever, that's fun, but mostly people who felt that they could finally affirm their intuition about God that they got from Jesus. Like, if your theology gets in the way for you acting or telling a gospel that's like Jesus, then fix it. And so the series starting with Jesus book, doing this stuff online, is really to create space for people to have those encounters, because you can connect with people all over the place at different spaces. And interviewing and doing people from different perspectives is important for me, because I don't want them to think they have to arrive at mine, because whatever those three evangelical charismatic ministers think is not Tripp's theology. But they at least listened and thought long enough that they got to own their position as a minister in a way that coheres with how they really believe the good news should sound. And that's more of the intuition. So in the book and in the podcast, I want to create the space for thinking rather than be like, oh, here's this. And in the classroom, I want to make the space for them to think rather than going, oh. So at the Hatchery, our students are doing a master's in theological studies, which is the main thing I organize. I teach some of the classes. Walter Brueggemann is teaching the Old Testament class this summer. Caputo taught a class. It's a really cool program for that part. The other half is social entrepreneurship program, where you're starting a nonprofit or activist group around your passion for God's justice while you're in school. So you're creating a service-centric community of faith. And what's crazy means that in the room, students teaching the class, I have someone who thinks the feminist Catholic is their ally, and one that thinks Peter Hodgson is, and one that thinks the black theologian is, and one that thinks everyone else is a heretic, except they do know that God likes communities where everyone's welcome and likes Amish young. And no one has the weird binary "you're not one of us" thing, because everyone that's in the room is there to bring a community into being that's not built on our teaching or our doctrine, but our service and care for the community. And so I feel like that space allows me not to.
I mean, I'm wondering, is this not one of the biggest shifts or developments in theology in the past 100 years? From progressive to conservative, is that everyone is now on board with saying you cannot do theology without there being some ethical, social, practical, real life application, integration, form for this thing. I mean, it feels like, 100 years and before, you could do a systematic theology and then in a separate volume do something called ethics. These things could be separate. I mean, I don't see any theologian
what's funny is that
doing that.
It seems weird to us that theology and ethics are different entire areas of study, and that you could have multiple degrees in one without taking the other.
Right.
But non-theological ethics is crazy too.
Right. Yeah, I don't think that exists.
No, it was the bill y'all recently passed. It was non-theological ethical enforcement. So, or bad theology.
But it's bad. I mean,
in part of it, I think, is institutional transition. So I worked at a very large UCC church in the most rich part of Los Angeles for 8 years. And the median income of our congregation had 6 figures in it, and it didn't involve a 1. The percentage of our budget that would go external was smaller than when I worked at a church of 90 people.
Wow.
And so the Hatchery's goal, and what I think I can make a list of people doing it all over the place, is let's switch the model where you as the minister are an entrepreneur and creating a sustainable community around service, and then you figure out how we sing and read the Bible and learn and talk together. Mm-hmm. And most of us probably do that. If you're a minister, heads up, your church doesn't even go to your church. The people you're honest and talk about your faith with are probably other ministers or your friends from seminary or what. Like, you don't actually treat your church as your community because you can't tell them the truth of what you really are thinking, because then that 10% that does help the homeless shelter will go to 5 and they might fire you. So the idea is to just shift the economic model so that you have the ability to be consistent, prophetic, honest in your teaching, but that's secondary to the fact that the people gathered. One of the students is working on building a community for individuals with significant disabilities and their caretakers. And he's leads the prayer sessions and stuff at the L'Arche community in town, and who's doing this. I think this is the coolest thing ever. Caretakers and individuals with special need, he organized a nature photo walk. And the mentally handicapped individuals took all the pictures. And then he had them professionally edited and printed up in big things, and had a art gallery, a pop-up art gallery at the hipster ethically sourced coffee roastery. And those individuals who he's been facilitating their prayer time at the L'Arche community in the area shared the joy they found in the picture when they took it and when they're looking at it. Now, you could have took the theology class, but being moved by the kingdom of God and things like that, when we who go to art galleries all the time, if you're artsy hippie in the beach of California, to then decide that the perspective on the world we should learn and engage, looking for the depth dimension that we often ignore, is the story and vision of someone you would not even want in your worship service at most churches because they're distracting.
Wow. Yeah.
Now, that is church.
Yeah.
It's different, but I find that moving, and I feel like there's a million of communities can be built like that because they're being built around the passion of the community to change the world, and then you do the other stuff. So, he does do a lot of the sacraments and preaching and things with them in ways that would make sense if you took your job as ordained clergy to proclaim the word to the people you're talking to. And they regularly are the ones that get ignored. And the other half of it is caretakers of people with significant disabilities. I'm only reading the stuff he's telling me, and I met a few of them. Their spirituality is some of the most beautiful things. Changing the diaper on your brother who's in his 40s 7 times a day becomes a prayer. That's cooler than centering your worship service on Just As I Am with all the verses. I don't think that it's an either or, because a lot of the students are also members at more traditional churches and things, and then they are doing this. But I feel like we need to turn our investment and energy and our creative minds. The average IQ of a minister in the United States has dropped 30 points in the last 40 years.
Oh, no. Don't tell us that.
And there's a reason. Because being a minister turned from being an intellectual person of integrity with a public platform they use for the common good in a community that's looked up to a butt of a joke. Now, my friend, one of the students who does that, when he shows up at our Redondo Beach Council meetings on setting standards for people with special needs, he gets dignity I don't get when I show up. Why? Because he knows those people, tells their stories, and is their voice in that situation. And when you're enabling the gifted and called and created people in the church to create communities of faith that are actually transforming things, I think it becomes exciting and enticing. The idea of getting a bunch of debt to get a stole.
Yeah.
To then make sure that you can creatively say half of what you learned and hide the other half is just not interesting. So, but I don't think we need to spend all of our time trying to change something that is well and good for some people there. We probably should refer more of them to therapists, but But I think we can figure out how to put energy in new things. And it's not that complicated. Like the other day Rob Bell came up and did the public speaking preaching seminar for the students. Yeah. And, he's like explaining how you prepare talks and how you give it. And here's how you do it if it's in a nonprofit context or at a sermon, or if you're doing it with Oprah's speaking tour, which I'm sure someone's going to use that. He's like, and 10,000 people all have things on their iPhone that will follow what you do. Right. Oh, but we were talking about it, and one of the things he said that I never heard in a preaching class, probably because it would have had further employment numbers drop significantly, which doesn't help recruiting. He was like, look, here's the thing. You can be yourself, or you can preach a lie. And it doesn't matter who you're talking to. Now, your kids pick it up first. Yeah. And then your wife points it out, or your husband points it out, and then you're like, oh.
Yeah.
But the idea that your proclamation as a Christian in any vocation has to do with you being organizing your passion around like something other than you and living with it in integrity, that was like how he framed you talking.
Yeah.
And that's not what I was told.
Well, I mean, let me push back a little bit here on the idea of, if we maybe just have a second more to say, given kind of your idea about all these kind of really creative, integrative ideas for ministers and way of kind of doing this, I mean, I'm wondering, it feels like for the average pastor, so much more has been added to their plate in terms of, this person has to be manager of finances. He's got to be she or he has got to be a counselor. They've got to be, a preacher, an expositor, but also like somehow kind of a group leader. And now you want to say also a social entrepreneur and social worker. I mean, how much can you put on one person to be competent at?
Well, I actually think there's two problems. One, new things are not born in cups that still have stale wine in it. Like you actually have to clean it out and wash it. But the desire that your minister should be the answer for all things is just bad. It's bad theology. It's bad ecclesiology. The reason that ministers tend to think they have to be the expert and do all of that is more. I'm speaking in generalizations to be quick. It usually has more to do with their insecurity about empowering the other priest in their congregation, which would be everyone that's baptized, rather than like them being the ones that do it. The turning the minister into the CEO, as opposed to like leading a jazz ensemble or being the affirmer in chief or the creativity nugget dropper or whatnot. Like, I feel like that has led to you as a minister feeling responsible for things that Jesus actually told every Christian it was their vocation. Yeah. He didn't say, hi, ordained people, when you pray, go in a closet. He told them all. He didn't say, like, when you give, minister, who gives up all your family time and self-care so that you can do what God called you to do while you destroy your own well-being and your family that God actually said you covenanted with, but you did not covenant with this church, so you should reevaluate. He didn't say, like when you give, when you pray, when you love, all these things he assumes are the vocation of a Christian. Yeah. But the church has I feel like it's a market reason that you refuse to actually let people figure out that Jesus bids you come and die, so that you, instead of like talking about Christianity, you talk about folk religion and put a Jesus stamp on it, but it's smaller than the American flag behind the Eucharist table. So but everyone that's called and goes and went to those churches thinks that's what being faithful is. Occasionally they discover that that's not, and then they're like, but I owe a lot of money, and this is where I'm working, and have you ever tried to make a decent income? And you're like, oh, yes, I'm an MDiv. What's that mean? It means I'm a slightly above average therapist, public speaker, organizer, meeting leader, and I can do silly songs and hand motions like a champ. And they're like, oh, that's interesting.
This podcast is sponsored by Phillips Seminary in Tulsa, Oklahoma, a theological school that offers Christian education in service of intelligent, just, and compassionate religious and civic communities. They welcome students to a safe space for truth-seeking conversation about the Bible, Jesus, and faithful living. They have on-campus and distance learning options. Go check them out at www.wherefaithleads.com.